The Great Hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy. Hundreds of alien beings filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and growls. Above them all, holographic displays showed the same terrible image. A beautiful blue and green world slowly turning gray as deadly clouds spread across its surface. Hyunwoo Park adjusted his translation device and watched the chaos unfold before him. As Earth's junior diplomat, he had attended many Galactic Council meetings, but he had never seen anything like this. The emergency session had been called just 6 hours ago, and delegates from across the galaxy had rushed to attend. At the center of the hall stood a small group of beings unlike any others present. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Their large eyes held tears that looked like liquid starlight, and their delicate hands shook as they pleaded with anyone who would listen. These were the Villani, and their world was dying. Dae-Young Kim, Earth's senior ambassador, leaned over to whisper to Hyunwoo. The bioweapons started falling 3 days ago. The Corvan Empire wants their planet for its mineral wealth. Hyunwoo had heard of the Corvan Empire. They were a race of warriors who conquered worlds by poisoning them first, then moving in once the native life was dead. It was efficient, brutal, and completely legal under galactic law if no one stood in their way. The council chambers fell silent as Chancellor Vexhai of the Zenthari Republic called the session to order. The Chancellor was a massive creature with 4 arms and cold, calculating eyes. Behind him sat the other major powers, the hegemony's insectoid representatives, the crystalline beings of the Trade Federation, and dozens of others who controlled the galaxy's wealth and power. The matter before us today is simple, Chancellor Vexhai announced, his voice booming through the chamber. The Corvan Empire has claimed the Theros system under Article 47 of the Expansion Accords. The question is whether this council will intervene. One of the Villani representatives stepped forward. Her name was Lyra Esh, and she was their planet's most skilled diplomat. Her voice was soft but clear as she spoke. Honored members of the council, my people have lived on Theros for over 10,000 years. We are a peaceful race. We have never attacked anyone, never started a war, never taken what was not ours. All we ask is the right to continue existing. Prime Minister Koth of the hegemony clicked his mandibles dismissively. Your people contribute little to galactic commerce. Your technology is centuries behind current standards. What strategic value does your world provide? Lyra Esh's shoulders sagged, but she continued. We are teachers and healers. Our libraries contain knowledge that goes back to the dawn of civilization. Our artists create beauty that speaks to beings across the galaxy. Surely that has value. A cold laugh came from the Zenthari delegation. Poetry and paintings don't fund trade routes or maintain defense fleets. The Corvan Empire offers substantial economic partnerships to council members. What do you offer? Hyunwoo felt sick as he watched the proceedings. The other delegates weren't even pretending to consider helping the Villani. They had already made up their minds before the session began. This was just for show, a way to make their abandonment look official and legal. The vote was swift and brutal. One by one, every major power voted against intervention. The minor species that might have supported the Villani were too afraid to speak up, knowing that opposing the Council's will could bring economic ruin to their own worlds. When the final tally appeared on the main screen, the result was unanimous. The Galactic Council would not interfere with the Corvan Empire's claim on Theros. Lyra Esh collapsed to her knees as the decision was announced. Around her, the other Villani delegates wept openly. Their people had 3 standard cycles before their atmosphere became completely poisonous. No evacuation would be provided. No sanctuary offered. They were truly alone. As the chamber began to empty, Hyunwoo watched the abandoned Villani with growing anger. These beings had done nothing wrong except exist in the path of a stronger empire. They were scholars and artists, not warriors. They had trusted in the Council's promise of protection, and that trust had been shattered. He looked over at Dae-Young Kim and saw the same fury in his ambassador's eyes. Without speaking, they both knew what they had to do. Hyunwoo approached the Villani delegation as they prepared to leave. Lyra Esh looked up at him with eyes full of despair. I am sorry for what happened here today, Hyunwoo said softly. The Council has failed you, but perhaps there is another way. There is nowhere to run, Lyra Esh replied, her voice barely a whisper. We have no warships, no weapons, no allies. The Corvin will continue their bombing until every living thing on our world is dead, and then they will move in to strip our planet bare. What if I told you that Earth might offer sanctuary to your people? Hyun-woo asked. Lyra Esh stared at him in confusion. Earth? But your species is barely a century into space travel. You have no influence in the council. Why would you risk yourselves for us? Before Hyun-woo could answer, Ji-hoon Lee, Earth's military attaché, appeared beside them. The former soldier had been listening to the entire exchange from across the hall. Because it's the right thing to do, Ji-hoon said simply. My government needs to hear about this immediately. Within hours, an emergency session was called on Earth. President Min-soo Choi listened grimly as Dae-young Kim delivered his report via quantum communication. The president's advisors argued loudly about the risks of involvement. Earth was still a minor player in galactic politics. They had few ships, limited resources, and no real military power compared to the great empires. But President Choi had built his career on making difficult decisions when others would not act. He silenced the debate with a raised hand. 12 million innocent beings are about to die, he said quietly, not because they started a war or threatened anyone, but because they are weak and have something others want. If we stand by and watch this happen, what does that make us? It makes us smart, said General Hwan Sok-go, the president's chief military advisor. Mr. President, we cannot fight the Corvin Empire. They have more ships than our entire fleet. This would be suicide. President Choi stood and walked to the great window that looked out over Seoul's skyline. In the distance, he could see the launch platforms where Earth's small space fleet was based. Those ships had been built for exploration and trade, not war. But sometimes the right choice wasn't the smart choice. Contact the Vellani representatives, he ordered. Tell them that Earth offers sanctuary to any of their people who wish it. And mobilize our fleet. We're going to Theros. The room erupted in protests, but the president had made his decision. News of Earth's offer spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. The response from other council members was swift and unanimous. Humanity had made a terrible mistake. But on a dying world millions of light years away, a people who had lost all hope suddenly found reason to believe again. Earth, the small blue world that barely registered on galactic maps, had done what the great powers would not do. They had chosen to care. The alarms had been ringing for 3 days straight on Theros. Gray clouds rolled across the once blue sky, carrying death to everything they touched. In the capital city of Velandra, millions of Vellani huddled in sealed buildings, watching their world slowly transform into something that could no longer support their lives. Lyra Esh stood at the window of the emergency command center, her pale blue skin reflecting the sickly light from outside. The human offer of sanctuary had reached them just hours ago, but it seemed impossible to believe. How could one small species save 12 million beings when the mighty Galactic Council had refused to help? The human fleet has entered our system, announced Telvash, the young communications officer. His voice shook with a mixture of fear and hope. They're requesting permission to begin evacuation procedures. Through her tears, Lyra Esh smiled for the first time in days. Tell them yes. Tell them we are ready. In the depths of space, Admiral Sang Ho-yoon watched the massive Corvin fleet through his ship's viewing screen. The enemy had over 200 warships surrounding Theros, each one larger and more powerful than anything Earth had ever built. His own fleet consisted of 43 vessels, most of them converted cargo ships and mining platforms hastily fitted with whatever weapons they could carry. Sir, the Corvin are demanding that we leave immediately, reported Commander Boram Jang from the communication station. They say we have no authority here. Sang Ho straightened his uniform and walked to the center of his ship's bridge. Around him, his crew worked with quiet determination, knowing they faced impossible odds. These men and women had volunteered for this mission, fully understanding they might not return home. Open a channel to the Corvin flagship, Sang Ho ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Thekmor of the Corvin Empire. The alien was massive, with thick armor plating covering his body and forearms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His eyes glowed red with anger as he stared at the human admiral. You dare interfere with our rightful conquest? Thekmor growled. Your pathetic species will pay dearly for this insult. Sang Ho remained calm, his voice steady as he replied. We're not here to fight you, Admiral. We're here to save lives. Let us evacuate the Vellani, and we'll leave peacefully. Thekmor's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. The Vellani belong to us now along with their world, Leave immediately or we will destroy your fleet. I'm afraid we can't do that, Sang-ho said quietly. We didn't come here to surrender. We came here to save lives, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The Corvan Admiral's roar of rage echoed through the communication channel before he cut the transmission. Within minutes, the enemy fleet began moving toward the human ships. On Earth, Dr. Heirin Cho worked frantically in her laboratory, developing atmospheric filters that could keep the Volani alive during the long journey to Earth. The alien physiology was unlike anything humans had encountered before, requiring precise mixtures of gases that didn't exist naturally in Earth's atmosphere. We need at least 6 hours to finish the filter systems, she reported to Captain Tae-jin Kang, who was overseeing the conversion of cargo ships into passenger vessels. Can the fleet hold out that long? Tae-jin looked at the tactical display showing the developing battle near Theros. The first Corvan ships were already engaging the human fleet's outer perimeter. They'll have to, he said grimly. Those people are counting on us. Back in the Theros system, the impossible was happening. The human ships moved like nothing the Corvan had ever seen before. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, they scattered in all directions, using asteroids and debris fields to hide their movements. Commander Boram Jang led a squadron of converted mining ships in a desperate attack on a Corvan cruiser. Her vessels were slow and clumsy compared to the enemy warships, but they had something the Corvan didn't expect: complete unpredictability. Use the gravitational pull from that moon, she ordered her pilots. Slingshot around it and come at them from below. The maneuver was insane by galactic military standards, but it worked. The human ships accelerated around the moon's gravity well and struck the Corvan cruiser's unprotected underside before the enemy could react. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Admiral Techmore watched the destruction of his cruiser with growing confusion. These humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They used suicide runs, gravity wells, and debris fields as weapons. They seemed to ignore every rule of civilized warfare. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 12 so far, sir, his tactical officer reported. But we've only destroyed 3 human vessels. They're using tactics our computers can't predict. On the surface of Theros, the evacuation had begun. Human landing craft descended through the poisoned atmosphere, their crews wearing full protective gear as they loaded Volani families aboard. The aliens were weak from breathing the contaminated air, but they moved with desperate hope toward the promise of safety. Lieutenant Yoonji Nam piloted her transport through the toxic clouds, her cargo hold packed with Volani children and their teachers. The young pilot had volunteered for the most dangerous runs, knowing that the smaller ships could move faster through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Transport 7, this is base control, came the voice through her radio. You have Corvan fighters incoming. 3 minutes to intercept. Yoonji looked back at the frightened alien children behind her. They trusted her to get them to safety and she wouldn't let them down. Understood, Control. Beginning evasive maneuvers. The Corvan fighters were fast and deadly, designed to hunt down fleeing refugees. But Yoonji had grown up racing atmospheric craft through Earth's mountain ranges. She dove toward the planet's surface, using the toxic storms to hide her ship's energy signature. The first fighter found her anyway, its weapons tearing into her ship's hull. Alarms screamed as life support systems failed, but Yoonji kept flying. She had to reach the human fleet. She had to save these children. Transport 7, your ship is breaking apart, the radio crackled. Abort and return to base. Yoonji looked at the damage reports flooding her screen. Her ship wouldn't survive another attack, but she was close now. So close to the safety of the fleet. Behind her, a Volani child was crying softly, calling for his mother in words she couldn't understand but somehow felt in her heart. The second Corvan fighter appeared on her sensors, weapons charging for the killing blow. Yoonji made her choice. She turned her crippled transport directly toward the enemy ship, pushing her engines beyond their safety limits. Tell my family I died doing something that mattered, she whispered into the radio. The explosion lit up the poisoned sky of Theros like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the transport's escape pods were already being recovered by human rescue vessels. Every one of the Volani children survived. The evacuation continued through the night and into the next day. Human ships dove repeatedly into the toxic atmosphere, racing against time as more and more Corvan reinforcements arrived. The space battle raged around them, with Earth's small fleet somehow holding off an enemy 10 times their size through sheer determination and tactical innovation. As the last transport left Theros, Admiral Sang-Ho received the final count. 11,200,000 Villani had been saved. The cost had been severe. 21 human ships destroyed, over 3,000 crew members lost, including heroes like Yoonji Nam, who had given everything to save alien children they had never met before. But they had done it. Against all odds, in defiance of galactic law and common sense, humanity had saved an entire species from extinction. As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Theros completed its transformation behind them. The beautiful blue and green world had become a lifeless gray rock, suitable only for Corvan colonization. The galaxy would never be the same. The first transport ships arrived at Earth 6 weeks after the rescue. Director Ju Young Park stood at the viewing platform of Luna Station, watching as dozens of vessels approached the blue and white planet below. Inside those ships were over 11 million beings who had never seen Earth before, refugees from a world that no longer existed. "Are we ready for this?" asked Dr. Su-Min Yang, the cultural expert who had been working non-stop to prepare integration protocols. Her team had studied every piece of Villani culture they could find, but theory was very different from reality. Ju Young adjusted his glasses and looked at the reports on his tablet. Emergency housing had been set up across 6 continents. Medical facilities were prepared for alien physiology. Translation systems had been updated with Villani language patterns, but nobody really knew if it would be enough. "We'll find out soon," he said quietly. The first Villani to step onto Earth was Lyra Esh. She moved slowly down the ramp of her transport ship, her large eyes taking in everything around her. The air smelled different here, full of strange scents from plants and animals that had evolved on a completely different world. The gravity was slightly heavier than Theros, making each step feel unusual. But what struck her most was the chaos. Earth wasn't like the carefully planned stations of the Galactic Council. There was noise everywhere, vehicles moving, people talking, construction machines working. Children were playing in a nearby park, their laughter mixing with the sounds of music from street performers. It was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. "Welcome to Earth," said a young human who approached her. He looked nervous but friendly, holding a translation device in his hands. "My name is Donghyun Cha. I'm here to help you get settled." Lyra Esh touched her own translator and replied, "Thank you. I am Lyra Esh. Is it always so?" "Lively here?" Donghyun laughed. "This is actually pretty quiet for Seoul. Wait until you see the busy parts of the city." The early days were difficult for everyone. The Villani needed special atmospheric processors in their living areas, creating domes of breathable air throughout human cities. Their emotional sensitivity made them react strongly to human emotions, often becoming overwhelmed in crowded places. Many humans struggled to understand why the aliens seemed so fragile and afraid. Cultural misunderstandings happened daily. The Villani way of greeting involved a gentle touching of foreheads, which many humans found uncomfortable. Human habits of loud talking and sudden movements frightened the peaceful aliens. Some Villani children couldn't sleep because of the constant noise of human cities. Dr. Su-Min Yang worked 18-hour days trying to solve these problems. She set up cultural exchange centers where humans and Villani could learn about each other safely. She created guides explaining Villani customs to human families and taught Villani refugees about human social behavior. "We need to remember that they've lost everything," she explained to a group of frustrated human officials. "Their world is gone, their entire way of life destroyed. Of course they're having trouble adjusting." The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Donghyun Cha had been assigned to help a Villani family settle into their new home in Seoul. The family included a young Villani named Veltar, who was roughly the same age as Donghyun. Despite the language barrier and cultural differences, the two teenagers discovered they both loved mathematics and music. "Numbers are the same everywhere," Veltar explained through his translator as they worked on calculus problems together. "Music too. It speaks to something deeper than words." Soon they were spending hours together, with Donghyun teaching Veltar about human music, while Veltar shared the complex mathematical harmonies that Villani used in their compositions. Their friendship became a model that other humans and Villani began to follow. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening in the scientific community. Professor Ki-Wan Lim had been working with a team of Villani researchers on energy manipulation technology. The humans brought practical engineering knowledge, while the Villani contributed theoretical understanding that was centuries ahead of human science. "Look at this," Kiwan said excitedly to his research partner, a Villani scientist named Korvesh. They had been working together for 3 months, and their latest experiment had produced results that neither species could have achieved alone. The energy matrix they had created could store and redirect power with 97% efficiency, far beyond anything either civilization had developed independently. It was proof that the two species were stronger together than they ever could be apart. But not everyone was happy with the integration. The Corvan Empire had been watching Earth carefully since the rescue at Theros. Admiral Thekmor's forces had begun attacking human colonies on the Outer Rim, testing Earth's defenses and resolve. General Inseok Ryu studied the tactical reports with growing concern. The human fleet was scattered across the galaxy, protecting trade routes and refugee settlements. They couldn't be everywhere at once, and the Corvan knew it. "They're picking us apart piece by piece," he reported to President Min-Soo Choi during a secure communication. "Every time we respond to one attack, they hit us somewhere else. What do you recommend?" the president asked. Inseok looked at the star charts showing human positions throughout local space. "We need to consolidate our forces, pull back to defensible positions and make them come to us, and abandon the outer colonies." The general's expression was grim. "If we don't, we risk losing everything." The decision was postponed when Dr. Heron Cho announced a breakthrough in her research. Working with Villani biologists, she had developed new medical treatments that could heal injuries and diseases that had plagued both species for generations. The combination of human adaptability and Villani precision was creating miracles in laboratories across Earth, but the most significant development came from an unexpected collaboration between human artists and Villani musicians. A composer named Soo-Jin Park had been working with a group of Villani to create something entirely new. Music that could be understood and appreciated by both species. "Human music is about emotion and energy," Soo-Jin explained to her Villani collaborators. "Your music is about mathematical harmony and spiritual connection. What if we combined them?" The result was unlike anything either species had ever heard. The first joint concert was held in Seoul's Olympic Stadium, with an audience of both humans and Villani. When the music began, something magical happened. The barriers between the two species seemed to dissolve as the harmony spoke to something universal in both their hearts. Lyra Ish sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face as she listened to the impossible beauty of the combined music. Around her, humans and Villani swayed together to the same rhythm, their differences forgotten in the face of shared wonder. After the concert, she found Dong-hyun in the crowd. The young human who had welcomed her to Earth was grinning widely, his eyes bright with excitement. "Did you feel that?" he asked. "It was like we weren't two different species anymore. We were just people, enjoying something beautiful together." Lyra Esh nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to say, "This is what my people always believed in. That understanding comes not through words or laws, but through shared experience, through touching what is beautiful in each other." News of the concert spread throughout the galaxy. For the first time since the rescue, people began to see the human-Villani alliance as something more than a political arrangement. They were watching two species become one people, creating something new and wonderful from the ashes of tragedy. But in the darkness between the stars, the Corvan Empire was preparing its response to this growing hope. Admiral Thekmor had received new orders from his emperor. If the humans and Villani could not be separated, then both species would have to be destroyed. 2 years had passed since the Villani arrived on Earth. The blue planet had become something no one expected, a beacon of hope for species across the galaxy. Every week, new refugee ships arrived carrying beings from worlds that the Galactic Council had abandoned or forgotten. Fleet Admiral Young-Soo Han stood on the bridge of the EFS Unity, one of the new ships built using combined human and Villani technology. The vessel was twice as fast as the old human ships and carried energy shields that could deflect Corvan weapons. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, a mix of humans and Villani who had learned to fight together. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Ethereal Archive System," reported Lieutenant Minho Park, the communications officer. "The Corvan fleet is 3 days out from the main worlds. Young-Soo felt his stomach drop. The ethereal archives were the galaxy's greatest treasure, 12 worlds that contained the collected knowledge and art of thousands of civilizations. Libraries that held the wisdom of species that had died out millions of years ago. Museums filled with beauty beyond imagination. "What's the Council's response?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The same as always, sir. They've declared the archives strategically unimportant and refused to send help." Young-Soo closed his eyes for a moment. The Galactic Council had learned nothing from the Vellani tragedy. They still believed that power and profit were more important than preserving life and knowledge. "Contact Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need to act fast." On Earth, President Min-Soo Choi received the news while meeting with representatives from a dozen refugee species. The presidential mansion had been expanded to accommodate beings with different atmospheric needs. Translators worked constantly to help everyone communicate. "The archives contain knowledge that can never be replaced," explained Dr. Naewon Kim, Earth's leading xenoarchaeologist. "If the Corvin destroy them, we'll lose millions of years of galactic history." "How many people live in that system?" the president asked. "About 50 million spread across the 12 worlds. They're mostly scholars, artists, and caretakers. No military forces at all." President Choi looked around the room at the alien faces watching him hopefully. These beings had all come to Earth seeking protection because their own governments had failed them. Now Earth had a choice: play it safe and protect only their own people, or risk everything to save others once again. "Admiral Han, how many ships can you take to the archives?" 47, sir. "But the Corvin will have at least 200. And if we don't act?" Young-Soo's voice was quiet but firm. "Then 50 million innocent beings will die, and the galaxy will lose treasures that can never be recovered." The president made his decision. "Save them, Admiral. Save them all." The journey to the ethereal archives took the human Vellani fleet 5 days. During that time, something unexpected happened. Ships from other species began joining them. Small vessels from forgotten worlds, cargo haulers converted into rescue ships, even some military vessels whose crews had grown tired of their government's cowardice. Captain Sung-Hwan Oh commanded one of the escort ships, the EFS Harmony. His crew included humans, Vellani, and now 3 other species who had volunteered to help. They weren't the largest fleet in the galaxy, but they were united by something the great powers had forgotten: the belief that some things were worth fighting for. When they arrived at the archives, they found the Corvin fleet already in position around the 12 worlds. Admiral Thekmore's flagship sat like a massive predator in the center of the formation, its weapons trained on the beautiful crystal cities below. "This is Admiral Thekmore to the terrorist fleet," came the transmission. "You are interfering with legal military operations. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Admiral Young-Soo Han opened a channel to reply. "This is Admiral Han of the Free Species Alliance. We're here to evacuate civilians from a war zone. Stand down and let us do our work." Thekmore's laughter echoed through space. "There is no Free Species Alliance. There are only the strong who take what they want and the weak who die. Which are you, human? I guess you're about to find out." The battle for the ethereal archives began with a move no one expected. Instead of attacking the Corvin fleet directly, the human Vellani ships spread out around all 12 worlds simultaneously. They had come not to fight, but to save lives. Admiral Yujin Bei led the main rescue operation on Archive Prime, the largest of the worlds. Her ships descended through the planet's atmosphere, while Corvin fighters pursued them. But something was different about this battle. The rescue ships had energy shields that seemed to bend and flow like living things, deflecting weapons with impossible grace. "How are they doing that?" Thekmore demanded from his bridge. His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with confusion. "The shields appear to be powered by some kind of crystallized energy matrix. Our computers can't analyze the technology." What the Corvin didn't understand was that the shields were powered by something more than technology. Working with their Vellani partners, human engineers had learned to focus determination itself into a usable form. The stronger their desire to protect the innocent, the stronger their defenses became. On Archive Prime, Commander Hyun-Soo Kim led his Marines into the Great Library, the largest repository of knowledge in the galaxy. The building was enormous, its crystal walls reaching into the clouds. Inside, millions of beings from dozens of species worked frantically to download what information they could before the evacuation. "How long do we have?" asked Lysandra, the head librarian. She was one of the archive keepers, a species that had dedicated their entire civilization to preserving knowledge. "The Corvin will start bombing in 6 hours," Hyunsuk replied. "We need to get everyone out before then." 6 hours? Lysandra's expression was one of pure despair. It would take 6 years to properly evacuate this facility. The knowledge here represents the collected wisdom of 3 million years of galactic civilization. Hyunsuk looked around at the endless halls of data crystals and hollow archives. Each one contained information that could benefit all species in the galaxy. The idea of letting it be destroyed was unbearable. "Then we don't evacuate it," he said suddenly. "We defend it." Meanwhile, engineer Sun Hee-jan was working on something impossible in the planet's power generation facility. Using Vellani energy manipulation techniques and human engineering principles, she was attempting to create a planetary defense shield. "The power requirements are enormous," she explained to her mixed team of human and alien engineers. "We'd need to channel the emotional energy of every person on this world. Can it be done?" asked her Vellani partner Morvesh. Sun-hee looked at the calculations on her screen. By every rule of physics she knew it should be impossible. But they had already accomplished so many impossible things in the past 2 years. If we can get everyone on the planet to focus on the same goal at the same time, maybe. It's never been tried before. Then let's make history. As the Corvin fleet prepared for their final assault, something extraordinary began happening on the surface of Archive Prime. Word spread through the crystal cities that the defenders needed everyone's help. Not soldiers or weapons, but something much more powerful: unified hope. In the great library, scholars from 100 species joined hands and focused their thoughts on protection. In the art galleries, artists channeled their creativity into visions of safety. In the schools, children from across the galaxy closed their eyes and wished with all their hearts for the bad ships to go away. And slowly, impossibly, a shield began to form around the planet. Not made of metal or energy, but something far stronger. The combined will of 50 million beings who refused to let beauty and knowledge die. Admiral Techmore watched in shock as his most powerful weapon struck the shield and simply disappeared, absorbed by something his sensors couldn't even detect. "What is that thing?" he roared, but his officers had no answer. They were witnessing something that had never existed before in galactic history, an entire world protected by the power of hope itself. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the Corvin Empire had encountered something they couldn't understand or defeat: the determination of beings who believed that some things were worth more than their own lives. 5 years had passed since the rescue at Theros, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The old Galactic Council sat in their grand halls on Nexus Prime, but their words carried little weight anymore. Across the stars, world after world had chosen to join the Free Species Alliance, leaving behind the corruption and indifference of the old order. On Earth, Chancellor So Young Kwan of the newly formed Terran Vellani Federation stood before representatives from 63 different species. The Great Assembly Hall in New Geneva had been built to accommodate beings of all sizes and atmospheric needs. Here, for the first time in galactic history, every voice mattered regardless of how small or weak their species might be. "The reports are coming in from across the galaxy," So Young announced to the gathered delegates. "The Corvin Empire is collapsing. Their subject worlds are declaring independence. Their military is in full retreat." The hall erupted in celebration as beings from dozens of worlds cheered in their own languages. But So Young raised her hand for silence. "We must not forget that this victory came at a great cost, and our work is far from finished." The final confrontation had begun 3 weeks earlier, when the Corvin Empire made their last desperate gambit. Emperor Vekthul himself had arrived at Earth, with the largest fleet ever assembled. Over 1,500 warships carrying weapons capable of cracking planets in half. "If we cannot rule the galaxy," the Emperor had declared in his final transmission to Earth, "then we will ensure that no one else can either. Starting with the world that dared to defy us." Admiral Myung-Hwan Shin had watched from the bridge of the EFS Liberation as the massive Corvin fleet approached Earth's solar system. His own forces included ships from 40 different species, each contributing their unique strengths to the defense. Human tactical innovation, Vellani energy manipulation, ethereal archive defensive systems, and technologies from dozens of other cultures had been combined into something the galaxy had never seen before. All ships, maintain formation, Myung-hwan ordered as the enemy fleet entered weapons range. Remember, we're not just defending Earth. We're defending the idea that hope can triumph over fear. The battle for Earth became the largest space engagement in recorded galactic history. Thousands of ships clashed in the darkness between the planets while Earth itself watched from below. In cities across the world, humans and Vellani and beings from dozens of other species stood together. Their faces turned toward the sky. But the real miracle began on Earth's surface as the Corvin fleet broke through the outer defenses. Lyra Esch, now serving as Earth's Minister of Interspecies Relations, stood in the Global Meditation Center in Seoul. Around her, millions of beings from across the planet joined hands in a circle that stretched around the world. "Focus on what we're protecting," she said softly. Her words translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Not just our lives, but our future. The future where all beings can live in peace and freedom. The meditation had begun as a Vellani tradition, but it had grown into something much larger. Human determination, Vellani spiritual harmony, and the hopes and dreams of 60 other species began to merge into a single powerful force. In space, Admiral Myung-hwan watched in amazement as his instruments detected something impossible. A field of pure energy was rising from Earth's surface, expanding outward to encompass the entire battle area. Corvin weapons that had been tearing through ship hulls moments before suddenly lost their power, absorbed by the growing shield of hope. "What is that?" demanded Captain Yoo-jin Han from the EFS Victory. "It's everyone," Myung-hwan replied in wonder. "It's every person on Earth and every being who believes in what we're fighting for. They're protecting us." Emperor Vekthul screamed orders from his flagship as his most powerful weapons proved useless against the expanding energy field. His ships began to malfunction as the very hatred and aggression that powered Corvin technology was neutralized by the overwhelming force of unified hope. "Impossible," he roared. "No single planet can stand against the might of an empire." But Earth was no longer a single planet. It had become the heart of a new kind of civilization, one built on cooperation instead of conquest, on protection instead of exploitation. The psychic shield that rose from Earth didn't just protect the home system. It reached across space to every world where beings had chosen freedom over fear. On planets throughout the galaxy, oppressed populations felt the wave of hope wash over them and found the courage to stand up against their oppressors. The Corvin Empire, built on intimidation and brutality, crumbled in a matter of days. Their subject worlds declared independence. Their military commanders surrendered rather than fight against an enemy they couldn't understand. Emperor Vekthul himself was captured when his own officers refused to continue a hopeless war. Now, 3 weeks later, the galaxy was free for the first time in centuries. But with freedom came the challenge of building something better. The old Galactic Council has requested negotiations, reported Ambassador Jae Min-ko during the Alliance Assembly. They want to discuss terms for reintegration. Chancellor So Young looked around the hall at the faces of beings who had suffered under the Council's indifference. "What do you all think? Should we give them another chance?" The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species wanted revenge for years of abandonment. Others argued for forgiveness and reconciliation. But in the end, it was a young human voice that provided the answer. Dong-hyun Cha, now a leader in the Cultural Integration Program, stood to address the assembly. Beside him stood his friend Veltar, the Vellani he had met 5 years earlier when the refugees first arrived on Earth. "My Vellani friend taught me something important," Dong-hyun said. "He told me that the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into a friend." The old council failed because they forgot that every being in the galaxy matters. Maybe it's time to show them a better way. The final vote was closer than expected, but the Alliance chose forgiveness over revenge. The old Galactic Council would be dissolved, replaced by a new galactic commonwealth where every species, no matter how small, would have an equal voice. The ceremony took place on Earth 6 months later. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the hills outside Seoul to sign the Commonwealth Charter. The document was simple but revolutionary. It declared that all intelligent life had equal rights, that no being should suffer because they were weak or different, and that the galaxy belonged to everyone who lived in it. Lyra Esch stood beside President Min Soo Choi as they signed the charter together. The Villani diplomat who had once begged for her people's lives was now co-administrator of a galactic government, built on the principles her species had always believed in. "Do you think it will work?" she asked the human president quietly. Minsu looked out at the crowd of beings from across the galaxy, all celebrating together under Earth's blue sky. Human children played with Villani youngsters while beings he couldn't even name shared food and music and laughter. 5 years ago, everyone told us that saving your people was impossible, he replied. They said we were too small, too weak, too naive to make a difference. But here we are. Lyra Esh smiled, her tears catching the light of Earth's sun. We were forsaken by those who claimed to represent civilization. But we found something better. We found family among the stars. The celebration continued late into the night as beings from hundreds of worlds danced together under the same stars that had once seemed so cold and distant. Ships from across the galaxy filled the sky, their lights creating new constellations of hope. In the gardens of New Geneva, human and Villani children who had grown up together played games that wouldn't have been possible without both species working together. They were the first generation to grow up in a galaxy where being different wasn't dangerous, where being small didn't mean being forgotten. And somewhere in the distance, more ships were arriving. More species who had heard the news that there was finally a place in the galaxy where everyone belonged, where no one would ever be forsaken again. The galaxy had found its way home.